Now let's break down what happened, because this is where it gets messy. And now forgive me if some of this is wrong or if I'm making a mistake on some of this stuff, but it is complicated. There's a lot of information scattered all over the place. A lot of people got this thing wrong, really, really wrong. So like for the first 2 years of this, even Trump was throwing Michael Flynn under the bus to a certain extent. He said he lied. There's videos of him on, he lied and he said this and he said that, and he's a traitor, and all these types of language was being thrown around because it looked pretty bad for Michael Flynn. Fortunately, a lot has developed through that time. So my point is that all these people on all different sides of the political spectrum were very angry about this, and many people thought that they had it all figured out and they had all the answers, and they really didn't. So let me give you my sort of breakdown, my analysis on what I think this looks like. And this is going to look really complicated. Brace yourself. All right. So here is the timeline on the Michael Flynn case. Now let's start on the left side here. On election day, okay, so you remember, right around November, we have an election. It's on November 3rd. We take it back to 2016, 4 years ago. Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton on election day. Obama's in office, Biden is vice president. So we start the election on November 3rd. A couple days after that, Obama issues some sanctions against the Russians. You remember that? So this actually not a couple days. This is a couple months later. A month later, Obama issues sanctions against Russia for interference, the Russian collusion. They bought some Facebook ads, this whole thing. He issues some sanctions. On the same day, General Flynn is speaking with a Russian ambassador named Kislyak. So Michael Flynn, who is now going to be a part of Trump's transition team. So he's going to help him get into office, and he's going to become his national security advisor. Trump wins the election, and then his national security advisor calls the Russians. Now, the nature of the calls, now remember, Trump has not taken office yet. So Obama is still in office. Trump is going to be taking office. He's the president-elect, but he's not the president yet. So Obama sanctions the Russians on December 29th. Flynn gets on the phone with the Russian ambassador, Kislyak. And you can see that here. They have a couple calls. Flynn and Kislyak speak on December 29th, and then Kislyak calls back 2 days later, on December 31st. Okay, so what the heck are these guys talking about? Well, Flynn is telling the Russian ambassador, hey, we know that Obama just passed these sanctions. Don't respond. Don't react. Don't do anything about those things. Okay, don't tell Putin, tell your people over there not to counter. Don't hit us back with sanctions. Don't press the nuclear button just yet. Okay, Trump is coming. Trump's on the way. He's going to be here in about a month. So just hang tight. Actually, less than that. He's going to be here in less than a month. So Flynn calls Kislyak, or Kislyak calls Flynn. I don't know who initiated the call, but they're talking because there's a transition taking place. Trump's team is going to be supplanting Obama's team, and all Flynn is trying to do is keep the relationship from souring, even though Obama just issued sanctions on the Russians. They decide, they're going to talk, and I don't know what the conclusion was. Doesn't really matter. The fact that Flynn is talking to the Russian ambassador, that's the subject of this whole thing. Everything else that you see here, it's all stemming from this one call. It's all stemming from Flynn saying, hey, we know that Hillary just lost. Trump won. Obama passed some sanctions against you. Hang tight. We think this is all nonsense. We're going to be in office in a month. Just don't respond. Let us get into power before you do anything, because if you do something now, it's going to jeopardize our working relationship for the rest of the administration. And I mean, to me, it sounds like a pretty reasonable call to be making, right? You're in a period of transition. There is a changing of the guard. You're going to have to hand over power one way or the other. So this is the subject of the phone call. Now, about a month later, Trump takes office in January 20th, 2017. Flynn, now remember, that entire time, Obama is still in power. So Obama still has control of the Department of Justice. Obama still has control of the Attorney General. He's still meeting with his cabinet. He's still got Biden in the office. He's got James Comey in the Oval Office. And so a lot of stuff is taking place behind the scenes before Trump ever takes office. So Trump now then takes office January 20th. FBI talks to Flynn on January 24th. So they come in just a few days after the Trump administration moves into the White House. They take power on January 20th and in 2017, and Flynn is now talking to the FBI. Now, if you've listened to James Comey, if you've been following this news at all, James Comey had said that they kind of broke their protocols for communicating with somebody from the White House because they knew that the Trump administration had just gotten in there. They were just setting up, and they really didn't know what the protocols were. So Comey said, no, we just sent somebody right over there. We just basically knocked on their door and said, hey, we want to have a friendly chat and let's talk about this stuff. So that's what they did. They have this conversation, and something happens. They start making these notes. Flynn goes on and he resigns in February 13th, 2017. So he was not part of the administration for long, just under a month. He resigns. And then Robert Mueller, you all remember Robert Mueller, of course, he gets appointed shortly thereafter. So he's appointed in May 17, 2017. Now, again, a lot of this stuff is all holdovers from the Obama administration. So we're in May. We're just 4 months into the Trump administration. Flynn has already resigned. He's talked to the FBI. He's done all of this stuff. And these are all Obama appointees. Trump hasn't appointed any of these people yet. So they're all holdovers from the Obama administration. Now, Robert Mueller gets appointed on May 17th. The investigation continues. This chart is not to scale. Okay, there's a lot of time that happens between this dot and this dot. Let's fast forward to December. General Flynn pleads guilty, and then Flynn is actually cooperating with the FBI from basically this entire time. So from about December 1st all through May 17th, 2017, all the way up until December 4th, 2018, Flynn is cooperating with the government, and he pleads guilty. And then a bunch of stuff starts leaking out. The Mueller report comes out. It basically says that, there's not much there. It's kind of a big nothing burger. The Democratic Party and Flynn have been investigating this stuff for a couple years. Mueller report comes out. It's a big nothing burger. Nothing really changes at all, but more stuff is coming to light because now the administration is investigating what was the basis of the underlying investigation. Now they're looking into, well, who were these FBI agents who were investigating Flynn? And how did they get his phone call? How did they know that he spoke to the Russian ambassador? All that stuff is supposed to be privileged, right? It's a matter of national security. Well, the U.S. government has wiretaps that they can just capture all of your phone calls. If you're communicating with a foreign adversary or a foreign power, your calls are subject to being wiretapped. They can just swoop up those calls. And so what they do is they mask the people who shouldn't have been scooped up in the calls. So you can scoop up anybody. If you're talking to the Russian president, you can spy on the Russian president. He's not an American. He's not subject to our constitutional rules. He's not subject to having his communications protected by the Fourth Amendment, the laws against unreasonable searches and seizures and those things. So you can listen to all of those foreign calls all day, all you want. But when that conversation involves a U.S. citizen, now you got to protect that citizen. We got to protect that person's rights. So they do what's called masking, meaning they take that person's information back out of the data, then they turn that data over to somebody. So in this situation, what it would have looked like is, well, somebody was talking to the Russian ambassador Kislyak. Somebody was. We don't know who, because that other person was masked. Well, now we go through an unmasking process. So you see how this gets complicated. So then they have an unmasking process where members of the administration, and in particular the Obama administration, because all this stuff was happening while it was on their watch, they're doing all of these unmasking procedures. They all know it's General Flynn because it's really easy to go get somebody unmasked. And now they are starting to, the theory is they're starting to calculate, how are we going to set this guy up? And this goes on. There's a lot to this that I'm not going to get into on this channel or on this particular episode. We may dive further into the story if there's a demand for it. But by and large, there's a lot of malfeasance going on. Flynn The Mueller report gets released. General Flynn changes lawyers, and then they get new information about these unmasking requests. We have more FBI documents that are unsealed, and then Flynn actually withdraws his guilty plea. So this is important. A lot of people have been one of the main criticisms of General Flynn has been that, well, he pled guilty, so obviously he's guilty, and he knew what he was doing, and if he said I'm guilty in court, that must mean he's guilty, and any attempt to withdraw a guilty plea, it must be false, or he must be lying about this, or there's something wrong with this guy. He pled guilty, he knew, he admitted he did it, because people think that people don't plead guilty, but I can tell you, people plead guilty all the time, even when they're not guilty. People plead guilty all the time when they're innocent, is the better way to say it. This happens all the time. It happens every day. People are pleading guilty to charges that they didn't actually do. This happens sometimes with their full knowledge. They know, like say, for example, if you get charged with a DUI and you want to reduce your DUI from a high-level offense to a low-level offense like reckless driving, well, you really didn't do reckless driving. You really did a DUI, but you're going to be pleading guilty to reckless driving because it's a lower-level offense. So it doesn't really apply to you, but you're going to plead guilty to that charge. And courts allow that to happen. Prosecutors allow that to happen. It happens every single day in our criminal justice system. People plead guilty for things that they didn't do. People also plead guilty because of coercion. They plead guilty all of the time because if they don't plead guilty, the penalties that they face as a result of our mandatory sentencing laws, which are very stupid, they can be sentenced for an eternity in prison. So if a prosecutor comes to you and you did a crime that you didn't do, let's take you specifically, I'm talking to you. Let's say that you're sitting there in a prosecutor's office. They're charging you with possession of drugs, something minor, right? Possession of Xanax, you don't have a prescription, and they come into you and they say, listen, we know that you did this. You go, I didn't do it. Like, we know you did it. Here, but because it's your first offense, because it's not a big deal, we're going to give you probation on this case, meaning as long as you're cooperative and you tell us where you got it and you do all of these things, we're gonna put you on probation. As long as you don't break the law, then you're not going to go to jail. All you have to do is just admit here that you plead guilty to that charge. We're just going to let you go. Okay, but I didn't do it, so I'm not going to sign that document. Okay, well, that's fine. That's your choice. You don't have to sign the document, of course. But just so you know that if you don't sign this document, that the mandatory penalty, according to our sentencing laws in our state, it means that if you go to trial and lose, you go to jail for 10 years. You go to prison, actually. It's prison for 10 years. So I've got this probation deal right here for you. Or you can reject it. That's fine. And we can just take your case to trial. And if you lose, we're going to be seeking the maximum. Actually, we're going to seek the aggravated term because of all the work you're going to put us through. And we're going to want 12 years in prison. So, of course, anybody in that position just goes, and they're right, by the way, a lot of the times. Now, this is just an example. The laws are different. They depend on all sorts of things. But it's an example. They have a big threat that they hang over your head, and they say, take this guilty plea. Otherwise, you are going to go to prison for a long time. And so everybody, of course, just goes, sure, give me the document. I'll sign it. No problem. And they do it all the time. They sign documents all the time. They plead guilty just to make the case go away because it's very expensive to go to court. It's very expensive to hire lawyers. It's very expensive to sit there all day and go through these proceedings. And it's just, it's a lot. And many people just don't want to do it. So if they have an easy way out, they're going to take the path of least resistance and they're going to sign a plea agreement, even though they didn't commit the crime, even though they are not guilty of that underlying offense. Happens all the time. And the final way that this stuff happens is when somebody's just in custody. This was not Michael Flynn's case, but this happens all the time. Somebody will get arrested for a charge. They'll go into jail. They'll spend the night in jail. The prosecutor will see them the next morning and they'll say, listen, if you plead guilty to this offense, I'll let you out of custody. I'll just let you out. Just go home. Just sign here. We'll go in front of the judge. We'll close this case out. You're done. You go home. And they say, well, what if I don't sign that? Well, then I'm going to be asking for a bond because we're going to have to go through the court process and I can't be sure that you're going to come back. So I'm going to ask for a $5,000 bond. And it's a real simple process. All you got to do is post your bond. Just take $5,000 and just throw it down with the court. They'll hold on to it for the next few months in case you need it. Just, you don't get to use it. They're going to hang on to that just to make sure you come to court and all those things. Then we'll let you out of jail. Okay, well, what about my charges? Oh, I'm still going to charge you. Yeah, we're gonna come back. We're gonna have multiple court dates, and yeah, at the end of it, I'm going to be asking for more jail time, and I'm also going to be opposing any dismissal request or any deviation request, and so those are your options. So again, people just go, all right, give me the document, and they just sign it. So people plead guilty all the time. It happens every day, every day, every day. Some of it's good. Some of it, we want that. We want those reductions. But some of it's not good. Some of it's very bad. So just the fact that Michael Flynn actually pled guilty really doesn't mean much of anything. People want to hang their hat on it. Doesn't mean much of anything. My understanding is there were some threats being made against his son, and they were threatening him, with all these additional repercussions, and he didn't have, Trump didn't have his back anymore. And so this guy is under a ton of pressure. So he pleads guilty. Then he actually changes lawyers. So from June 6th to June 12th, he changes lawyers. He gets a much better lawyer on his team. Sidney Powell has been running with this ever since all this stuff started happening. And then they file a motion to dismiss the case. They say new evidence has come out. It's exculpatory evidence. And there's been kind of a landslide of this stuff coming down the pike. And I think there's even more coming. If you believe Attorney General Barr, if you believe the Durham investigation, if you believe some of the guys who've been screaming about this stuff for years, like Dan Bongino and some of these other people, Trump himself is saying on his Twitter feed that there is more coming. There's the malfeasance here it's even greater than what you're expecting. And what happened is we got all sorts of information about the FBI really didn't have the authority to continue this investigation. They had it all justified on a false pretext, meaning they had no basis for listening in on those calls and really spending time investigating General Flynn. What they were charging him with, what the underlying crime that they were charging him with, is what we call a process crime.